So today we're talking about, obviously, our planetary near-death experience and dark night of the soul. And as I was saying earlier, this came about after I'd had a conversation with someone earlier this year. And we both had a near-death experience. And I was likening this current pandemic, what we're all going through, as similar to a planetary near-death experience, in that you know, in the beginning when the pandemic came to the fore, it was like the tables had turned and humanity had become the threatened species, basically, rather than some of the other ones that are becoming extinct. So we became the threatened species. And so in that way, we were facing our own mortality, because initially no one really knew what was going to happen. You know, we didn't know how this pandemic was going to play out. And as the numbers rose and rose and rose, it actually became quite frightening for a lot of people, including myself at times, as to where the heck it was all going to end, if it was ever going to end. And I guess, you know, in history, people who faced the bubonic plague and all the other plagues around the place, and there, in July, there was someone with bubonic plague in Inner Mongolia, and there's been someone in the US with the plague, and which thankfully these days can be treated as long as you get onto it quickly. And there are lots of different coronaviruses that are still with us. We're still living with it, but because this particular pandemic affected us collectively, you know, it's the ultimate universal experience that we will never forget in our own lifetimes anyway, and in history, that sort of got us all to face our mortality. And in that way, it was very akin to what people who have near-death experiences face. And not just near-death experiences, that can be expanded out to fear-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences. And that can cover things like people who report close encounters, or you know, alien abduction experiences, or out-of-body experiences that just occur out of the blue, or all sorts of things like that. After death communication, suddenly you see a deceased relative or friend, or just anyone that you know is deceased, and you see them out of the blue. And that can really, you know, turn your life upside down, inside out and back to front. So, and in that respect, that acts as the catalyst for the dark night of the soul. And the dark night of the soul experience is where you are, and in spiritual traditions it's called this, where you are no longer where you were or who you were, and you have not yet become who you're going to become because of your experience. You are just in the middle of it, and there are no handles, nothing to grasp onto. Your identity is of who you were before the experience disappears, and your new identity is yet to be formed, yet to be established. And in that way, it's very much like a shamanic initiation experience. And I guess the next question is, you know, if we look at that collectively, that we're all having an initiation experience. And the question is then, well, what are we being initiated into? And frankly, the answer is we just don't know, because we're not there yet. So let's go on to the next slide. Aha, there we go. So, you know, this year, like people who have these transformative experiences, you know, you have to come to the point where you say the past is done and it's over and there's no going back. And I can tell you from an astrological perspective, because we've had Pluto going through Capricorn with other planets this year, and Pluto going through Capricorn is, you know, Capricorn represents business and government and all those sorts of things, and Pluto is the end and the new beginning. So it's the death and the rebirth. So things that we have experienced so far in our lives, many of those, most of those, we will still go on to have them, but we will never have them the same way. And I was just looking at photos this morning from a UFO conference in Melbourne that Barry and I attended. And, you know, there was an auditorium. I was a speaker, that's why we were there. And there was an auditorium with 100 people in it. And then there was the dinner, and then the breakfast the next morning, and all the social sides of it too. And here's everyone all crammed up together, you know. And I said to Barry, you know, these are photos that we're going to be showing younger generations of how life used to be, because social distancing is going to go on for quite a while yet, quite a while, I think. So it's about us coming to terms with the past being done and over and going on to something new. And I really like this from Dr. Rhea White. I've followed her work for many years. She's since passed on. And she says the ceiling of the old paradigm is the ground floor of a new world view. And I think that's very true. You know, it's like the idea of the aspirations of this life are the seeds for the next, that sort of idea. So what we had seen as the ultimate in our current paradigm now becomes the baseline for the next paradigm to be built on. And this is a really nice one too, by T.S. Eliot, In My End, I got my camera in the way, is my beginning. And I think that's really relevant. That's an image of a eucalypt shooting from the bushfires in Victoria. And, you know, it shows that although things have ended, there's new beginnings to be built on top of that. And when we bring that back to near-death experiences, you know, I wondered, there's many people on the planet who've had near-death experiences, and they've had this progressive sort of path that they've gone on to, which is fairly predictable, and for many of them, it's like the core of the near-death experience. And it's very much about having that catalyst experience. I think I've got a slide with this on it. Where are we? Oh, no. Oh, first, before we do it, which takes us down the rabbit hole. I really love that image, so I just had to put it in there for you, because I think it's so true. We hear that phrase used all the time, and I thought, well, here's an image of what it's like down that rabbit hole. So with near-death experiences, we have our catalyst experience, which is the near-death, and it can be this, or the STE, the spiritually transformative experience, whatever it may be. And then we have this dark night of the soul, where we're stripped away of meaning and identity initially, until we can go on to build the new. But in that stripping away, and in the pressure of being in that situation, there are seeds that lay dormant inside us, and they start to grow. And a lot of people who report spiritually transformative experiences will come out of those experiences with different abilities, with you know, strange things sometimes too, like with NDEs, they can, if they actually end up in hospital and in that sort of situation and died on the operating table, those people can come back and they can actually have spontaneous knowledge of how to play a piano or how to speak a foreign language or those sorts of things, you know. But often it's more like the paranormal things, like, you know, being able to communicate with dead people or dead people appearing to them, or, you know, those types of things, just a lot of paranormal things going on for them. So those seeds that sort of lying dormant in them potentiate them. It's like the hothouse effect, and I've spoken about that before. Like what happens when you put plants in hothouses, they flourish and they, you know, they arise very quickly, and things in them emerge very quickly. And then after these types of experiences, which whether it's a near-death experience or another spiritually transformative experience, or our current pandemic situation, we then go on a quest for meaning. And that's why I've put this image here, because it reminded me of the quest with Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. And, you know, all the time that she was trying to find her way home, she came across these characters, the Tin Man and Scarecrow and the Lion, and the Tin Man wanted a heart, and the Scarecrow wanted, what was it, brains, and the Lion wanted courage. And yet through the journey, and Dorothy just wanted to go home, and through the journey, those four characters all discovered things about themselves, that the Tin Man all along actually had a heart, and the Scarecrow all along was intelligent and resourceful, and the Lion all along had courage within, and just needed something to bring that out. And then there's the integration process of bringing those things together within us to then start to form that new identity. So I think this is a really good outline for what we're going through currently with this pandemic, is that, you know, the catalyst is the pandemic. The dark night of the soul is suddenly a lot of people are out of work, and I've been out of work since March. And, you know, lives have changed, and some people have lost their homes because they couldn't keep up with payments, or, you know, family situations have changed. Some people have lost people, they've lost loved ones. But through that whole period of duress, there is that opportunity for potentiation to occur. And many of us have sort of been on a quest for a meaning then, you know, what's it all about? Why is this happening? And there's been like this struggle to find answers to all sorts of questions, to sort of find the truth of what's really going on. So I just thought I'd put that there because I thought and it reminded me of the shamanic journey, because in that the initiate goes on a quest to find themselves, and in that they find their vocation. And here we've got these four characters on the yellow brick road going to the Emerald City, where the Wizard of Oz is in charge, but at the end of that story it turns out that the wizard actually isn't a wizard at all, and he's actually someone from where Dorothy initially came from, I think. And in the end, Dorothy discovers that she could actually go home all along if she clipped those ruby red slippers that she was wearing 3 times and said, "There's no place like home." And in that, it's like a reflection of ourselves, going back to find ourselves and find our home, where we are and where we belong. So, and that we've seen that playing itself out, where people are going through this whole reevaluation process, which they do through in near-death experiences. After that, their values shift and change. And oops, we just lost someone. And so, and then the question is, what can we learn from the near-death experience that we can apply to our life now? But let's look at these individually. I mean, interchanging NDEs and spiritually transformative experiences. But a spiritual transformation constitutes a change in the meaning system that a person holds as a basis for self-definition, the interpretation of life and overarching purposes and ultimate concerns. So basically, you know, what has meaning for us changes. And who we are changes too when we have these experiences. And Joseph Campbell, he said, the dark night of the soul comes just before revelation. And when everything is lost and all seems darkness, then comes the new life and all that is needed. And I really like that. I thought it was, I think the interesting part of that is when everything seems lost, then comes the new and all that is the new life and all that is needed. And all that is needed is supplied to us. I think it's because we have it within us. And I put this in because I thought this is really what a dark night of the soul experience feels like, because I've been there. When I was really ill for 10 years and then I had a near-death experience in that, it's like you feel like you're holding on, just holding on, you know, hanging over the cliff. And there's not a whole lot you can do. You just have to wait until you can move through it somehow. And I thought I'd put this in because this is a good book that I've got, Dark Nights of the Soul by Thomas More. Not that I've read much of it, I've only read a chapter or two, but I've flicked through it. And he says that a dark night of the soul is a spiritual trial. An external event or an internal mood strikes you at the core of your existence. This is not just a feeling, but a rupture in your very being, and may take a while to get through to the other end of it. And I'm sure we've all had these experiences in our life, whether we've, you know, when we're caring for someone and then they pass away, when things have happened to us through divorce, through illness, you know, through loss of family members, all sorts of things that put us in these, what we feel is a dark place. I have to move my camera here. I've got in the middle. A dark night of the soul, what does it say? Forces us to rely on something beyond human capacity, opens us up to new and mysterious possibilities while we await liberation. And I think that's very true. It's like, you know, and I've got a slide later on, I think, reminds me of Nelson Mandela. And, you know, he was awaiting liberation when he was locked up, and he waited a very long time, the poor man. And even though he didn't have his physical freedom, he still had to hold on to something that got him through it. Unfortunately, dark nights of the soul open our imagination and perception. And when that happens, there's room for miracles, for mystery, for divinity, for light to enter us and change our perception, expand our thinking, expand our mind, open our minds up to think outside the box, to see things from a completely different perspective than what we might have. And I think that happens, you know, it's a strange thing that people who, you know, I can say this myself, put it that way. When I was ill for 10 years, there was 3 years where I was really, really ill. And I didn't know if I was going to make it through to the next week. And although I didn't want to go through that, it changed me in so many ways that I'm still discovering. That, you know, there were many seeds that were planted during that whole 10-year period, and they're still growing, and new ones are growing too. So it's not a dark night of the soul is not a short experience that you get over in a week or two. It's a long, extended experience that that takes us to places that we didn't know even existed within us, and hopefully opens up our mind. Hopefully. I just thought I'd throw this in because Zen koans are designed to do that, to break open our mind, or break open our brain, as it says here, so that light and a new perception, or to break the patterns of our thinking, so that there's space for new neural pathways to be laid down. And that then gives us opportunity to see things very differently. And most of the time we're living with, you know, an abstract of reality, with the reality in the background here and just the smaller view in the front there. And that's what happens when people who report near-death experiences and claim they've been to the afterlife, is that they, you know, they see things there that they say are more real and more clear and more beautiful and indescribable to what exists on the planet here. And that's really something for us to think about, I think, that you know, we just don't get it. We just don't get the clarity, the same clarity as we can when we're not here, when we're in this reality. Alternate realities can provide us with information that is not ordinarily accessible. It can provide opportunities for miracles to occur. It can provide opportunities for spontaneous healing to occur. And I don't know how that happens. I don't think anyone really knows how that happens. But you know, people can have illnesses, then have a spontaneous healing. In the meantime, they might have an out-of-body experience, or there are people who come back from an alien abduction experience, for example, who have spontaneous healing, or people who have near-death experience or fear-death experience, not caused by illness, but they might have a spontaneous healing. How does it happen that when we are in an altered state of consciousness, that healing can occur, and occur so quickly, when in this ordinary reality, nothing seems to cure it? It's a very interesting thing, and it's like when people have past life regressions, and they somehow go into that altered state of consciousness and going into another perspective of the experience that perhaps caused the illness, changes the healing or the healing process for them. And with the dark night of the soul, we're not out to solve it, but to be enriched by it. And I think when you say the phrase dark night of the soul, it's, you know, it sounds frightening and dark, black place, you know, it's a place with no light. That's what it sounds like. But actually, there is light in there, and that somehow changes us. But it can be very frightening while we're going through it. And as I said before, I think I was to you, I did an interview this morning on this topic, actually. You know, this is more like, from a shaman's perspective, a dark night of the soul is a shamanic initiation. And it's where, in a classic shamanic initiation experience, people are dragged off by the spirits, and that can be through a near-death experience, through a close encounter, like an alien abduction experience. But those things that take us away from our ordinary lives, from a shamanic perspective, are referred to as the spirits, right? And there we are dismembered. We are taken apart symbolically, and then made whole again by replacing parts of ourselves, like you know, the heart might be replaced by a crystal, and the kidney might be replaced by a stone, and another organ might be replaced by a stick or something like that. It's a symbolic remembering. And then after that, the individual comes back to their tribe, and they teach their tribe what they learned. Now that happens in near-death experiences, where those people, and close encounters and other types of experiences, where people have an experience and they come back to their tribe and they teach the tribe what they've learned from their experience of being in this non-ordinary reality. And, you know, I wonder, you know, with this pandemic that we're going through, there will be people who are being spiritually transformed. And I think a majority of the population on the planet are having that experience, where they are reevaluating things. Whereas, you know, someone might have in a near-death experience, they have can't think of the word, but they go through this reevaluation process, right? Then they come back and look at, well, what's important to me now and what's not. Same sort of thing here, that the shamanic initiate will have a different perspective, a different set of values, and then go on to pick up their vocation because of their experience. And this is where there's a reconnection to, oh, I have to move this camera, to the field of all possibilities in these altered states of consciousness. And this is what I was talking about before, where these miraculous experiences can occur. I don't know how it happens, it just happens. It'd be nice to know, because then we could do it, you know, when we want to. That doesn't mean that you don't go through emotional upheaval and that you can think that you're going insane, because I've spoken to a lot of people over the years who've reported close encounters, for example, who've lost it totally. They've thought, I am going insane, you know, I must be making this up, you know, I can't be having contact with extraterrestrials. And you know, they don't know what's real anymore. And in fact, we don't know what's real anymore. Do we really know what's real anytime? That's the question, you know. And that's what they bring back to us, is to always ask questions about what's real and what's not. We're certainly going through that at the moment. So there's that potentiation effect, that hothousing. And I think this is what's going on with planet Earth at the moment, that the planet is being hothoused. And it may be physically being hothoused in relation to the solar cycle. But I think a result of that is the rise of this pandemic, is that we are being emotionally and psychologically and spiritually hothoused too. And all of those experiences, you know, when we go on this quest for meaning, the near-death experiences question our existence, and we go, that happened, now what? You know, what's real, what's not, what do I think, what do I don't think, you know, all those sorts of things. What's the meaning to live or to not live? Why should I live? What is it about making living that makes it worth doing? What makes it important? And for near-death experiences, why do I want to stay on Earth, right? When they get to that, in that altered state of consciousness, and often they'll beg and plead to say, no, I don't want to go back to the planet. You know, I've had enough. Or I want to stay here. This is great. I love it. It's unconditional love. Everything's rosy and beautiful. But then, you know, the ones who obviously who have near-death experiences come back and tell us about it. And left with the question, well, what makes human existence valuable? Because after those experiences, people have a hard time being in ordinary reality. I mean, it's hard enough as it is for someone who hasn't had that experience at times, but generally, you know, they find it hard being here, and they go through a lot of grief because they want to go back there to where they feel it is home. And I think that in itself could be interpreted or reinterpreted as, we want to go home to ourselves, because that's where we came from, when we're all part of one. I guess those are questions that we all have to ponder on at times. So we follow the yellow brick road and we try and find our way back to ourselves, back to home, back to a grounded, more sane way of living, I think, and living the things that are valuable to us. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche, I wanted to talk about this because he said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, I don't know about that, but he was really referring to something that we now call post-traumatic growth. And this is what I'm talking about with that, that potentiation and then the integration. And I just thought I'd throw some of these up here because to show you that, there are things that have happened in the past that have changed our history, and not always badly, not always well, but not always badly. So we've had plagues before, and in 541 AD we had the Justinian plague. It led to a surge of licentiousness with lots of sex and alcohol and all things going on, and ethics gone out the window in that society, but it fueled the rapid rise in Christianity. And you can see how one would lead to the other. Think of that what you will. And then in 1340 we had the Black Death. There are an estimated 75 to 200 million people died from that. But that ended feudalism. And there were profound religious, social, and economic upheavals causing a historic shift toward the modern world. Because there were so few people around at the time, the craftsmen and the artisans, that a lot of them had died off. So they were able to say, well, no, we're not, it was a rise of capitalism, basically, that we value our life and our knowledge and our skills, and we want more money for this, and which led to all those things, and then led to capitalism too. And then we had the Lisbon earthquake in Portugal in 1755, killed 60,000 people, but it sparked the European Enlightenment. And that's interesting how these things happen, because it makes me wonder what's going to happen after this pandemic that we're going through now. Haiti had the yellow fever in the 1800s, 50,000 killed, but economically damaged France, causing Napoleon to sell French territory from New Orleans to Canada to America. So it changed the course of history, and perhaps in a good way. I'm not really sure with that one because I'm not American. And I don't understand American history as well as I'd like to. Then we had the Spanish flu, which we're all hearing about over and over and over again. Killed 50 million worldwide, but it revolutionised public health. And there was adoption of universal healthcare systems, which now are again being revised, hopefully. Then we had the Tangshan earthquake in 1976. And there were a lot of people that died there, but it was the end of the Maoist era in China. And then in 2001, this is really interesting to me, there were terrorist attacks, but 3,000 people, I think there were a few more, died. But interestingly, at the time, there were researchers studying suicide rates, and they found that they dropped by 40% in the countries that they were studying. And that's really interesting. So I guess these are examples of big things that have happened with large numbers of the population dying, and we've had that too. But how it changed the course of history, how there were these flow-on effects from it. Of course, that's where paradigms shift, isn't it? Where things change, we change our worldview, and we go on from there. And Lawrence Calhoun and other associates said that post-traumatic growth is the individual's experience of significant positive change arising from the struggle with a major life crisis. I think that speaks for itself. And survivors of major life crisis typically report a greater appreciation of life, greater personal strength, improved interpersonal relationships, a new life philosophy, and spiritual development. And that's what happens with people who report near-death experiences, any sort of spiritually transformative experiences. Oh, this is where I should have had this slide in the other spot, but it was basically Nelson Mandela. You know, if you can't be liberated physically, you can emerge with self-possession, vitality, and character. This is from the Dark Night of the Soul. And that man would have gone through that in a huge, huge way, that's for sure. So Thomas More says in his book that we are always the caterpillar in the cocoon and occasionally the butterfly flying free. And I think with this cocoon that we've got here, chrysalis, I think that it's called, that we're probably in that more than what we think we are. You know, as soon as we change and grow and become something new, we're still having new experiences. And we again go back into this chrysalis phase. You know, we're sort of like, what would you say, like the ebb and flow of the ocean, you know, where the waves on the beach at the same times that we are the ocean. That we are always changing and growing, and sometimes we will feel like that we are the butterfly. We've come out, we're all anew, but then that's only just the beginning of the renewal of another form of identity, which we will then in the future shed off and have another one. So some after effects of NDEs and STEs, and I'll finish this up soon, is that people come to love and accept others without attachments and conditions. They can have a sense of timelessness and be in tune with the flow of life and a heightened awareness of living in the present moment. They can have a personality reversal where forgiveness replaces criticism and condemnation, and achievers will relax, and uncommitted become movers and shakers. And they then regard themselves as an immortal soul in material form, so lessons can be learned while in the earth plane. And the foreign becomes familiar and the familiar becomes foreign. So things that once seemed, they thought, oh, I can't relate to that, they'll suddenly be able to relate to it because they've changed. And so it's from these after effects that I've been thinking, well, what can we learn from people who have near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences about how we move forward from where we are through into this new world that none of us really know, how it's going to be, what it looks like. And the core essence, I'm saying this for a reason because I'm going to get to another slide. The core essence of near-death states, this is by PMH Atwater. In her book, she says that everyone comes to the understanding that there is one God, and I would put that slash spirit slash whatever else you want to put in there, but a sense of a greater power in alive and awake in our lives. We are one people. We are one family, human family, one existence. I'm not sure why I put that in there now. Why did I put that in there? I'll come back to that though. And the one law is love, and the one commandment is to be of service, in service of, something higher than ourselves. And one solution to all problems is forgiveness. That's what PMH Atwater says. And I'm wondering how that's going to gel with us, with the people who come out on the other side of this pandemic. So Paladin Jenkins, he's still alive. He was a crop circle researcher. I heard him speak in Brisbane back in 92, I think it was. And he refers to near-death experiences as soul quakes. You undergo high stress. During that, there's brain enhancement. You can have a brain shift or a spirit shift, and I think that spirit shift is built on that brain shift, where you're laying down new neural pathways, which opens you up to a whole lot of other things that you weren't aware of or didn't know the possibility of before. You have that awakening experience, and a lot of people have had that, where they feel like, it's that when you go, aha, the aha moment. It's like, wow, so many things to know and that I didn't know before. Evolution of human consciousness. And here I've put here, transformation as a biological imperative, ? Because I wonder whether the spiritually transformative experiences that humans have, whether they're actually a necessity to move us from one place to another. Where would we be if we didn't have these types of experiences? And that then brings into the question, what are transcendental experiences and why do we have them? Why do we feel like we can reach out and connect to something that is not of this realm? Where does that come from within us? Where does that, and when we do that, how does miraculous healing happen? That's a very big question. I'd love to I look forward to hearing some of your ideas on that, hopefully. And now, if you think about, our ancestors would have had transformational experiences like after World War II, and their ancestors after World War I, and all the other things that have happened, Spanish flu and other plagues and all sorts of things that would have happened. And, you know, if we're looking at epigenetics, the effects of that have flowed on through our ancestral lines to us. So that, and I've said this before, but, you know, so we become the current evolution of our lineage. And what happens to us through this pandemic will pass on to generations in the future. And I think that not just through our physical descendants, because we're more than just physical beings, I think that, you know, that collective consciousness that we all share in, that worldwide web of consciousness, we pass on these experiences through that as well. So Paladin Jenkins talked about soul quakes which change us, and then we change the world. We become the change makers and the change artists depending on how we respond to these experiences, just like near-death experiences, and people have spiritually transformative experiences. I'm just going to click that, skip over that for now. I'm going to go on to blessed unrest experiences, which is what I was talking about before. Transform people into change artists who become self-organizing with no leaders / managers. Now, you would have noticed, like me, that at the beginning of the pandemic, many people returned to backyard gardening. They wanted to put in their, you know, their veggie gardens, which we did, and seeds and seedlings were sold out at Bunnings and other places like that. You couldn't get them for weeks. Why did we do that? Was that a survival instinct? Because we knew the food wasn't going to grow for months and months. Why did we do that? But we became self-organizing citizens of a city that was being threatened by a pandemic. No one told us to do that. No one told us to go and dig up the backyard. You know? But we did it. And just about everyone I knew did it. Even if they only just grew a few things in a couple of little pots, they did it. That's very interesting. So these experiences also move us into a larger picture of who we are. And we automatically live in accord with self-governance, self-responsibility, and self-awareness, because that's what else we did. We became self-responsible. Everyone panic bought everything, of course, but no one told us how to go out and do that. We just did it. We became responsible for ourselves. I mean, we went out and bought a freezer and filled it with, with my, you know, I cooked for weeks and filled that up. So, you know, it was a really interesting thing for me to watch people that I knew going through this thing as the same as me. So this collapse anxiety that we've been experiencing all year, and we're going to go on to experience a lot more because we have no idea how society is going to get through this, where the business is going to take us or not, or what's going to happen. And up until I read that term collapse anxiety, I was calling it annihilation anxiety. Because, you know, a lot of people were feeling like, this is the end, basically, the end of human society as we know it. And who knows, maybe it could be, I don't know. I'm hoping it's not. I'm optimistic it won't be, but you just never know. So progressive social movements originate from humans awakening to new consciousness. And that's what we're doing. We are all awakening to a new consciousness. Some of it we like and some of it we don't, but we have to adapt to survive and to go on from here. The purpose of transformative experiences is to help us remember what we have forgotten. And I think that's very true, because I know with myself that through this experience with the pandemic at least, and through the near-death experience and out-of-body experiences and close encounters that I've had and a whole lot of other strange, weird, wonderful, wacky experiences that I've had, that they realign you with, get you back on track. It's like you're changing tack and getting back to where you need to be. And through this pandemic, I know that for me, it's been about family, friends, and nurturing. And that's become, you know, top priorities for me. And I know a lot of other people have gone through that too. So we become co-creators with the Creator. Whatever guides us through these, to do things and to, you know, to go on a particular path, I think that we are guided by something higher than ourselves, that we sort of commune with, we come into alignment with when we're in the flow, right? When we've got our minds clear. And let's face it, there's been so much cacophony this year that it's been really hard to get a clear feel about and thinking clearly about what's going on and where we need to go. That's certainly for sure. And for me, I've had to pull back from, you know, being on the internet and watching the news and news items on Facebook. And for me, Facebook now has become so political, I don't even want to look at it. Whereas before, people were taking photos of food and their pets, and now it's all about, you know, so many politically minded posts, which is great that people are become socially conscious and politically conscious, but it's gone a little bit overboard for me, and it just becomes a bit too much, and you can lose your thinking, your own thinking processes. You know, your boundaries become blurred if you don't sort of pull back a bit and stay clear on a lot of things. Experiences re-establish continuity and order through rehearsals to prepare for true maturity. And in that, we can rediscover and re-identify with soul and spirit. And I think, you know, through the spiritually transformative experiences, near-death experiences, that they really do reconnect us with spirit, or with soul, or whatever you want to call it, with our soul, and connect us to the great spirit, so that we can always never really feel like we're alone when we make that great connection. But right now, I did a shamanic journey a few months ago, and I actually recorded it and put it up on my Body Light Center channel, because I've got two on there, because I felt it was really important. One, I wanted to, whatever I was getting through the shamanic journey, I wanted to just document it and to see what happened in the future, so I can look back and say, well, I said this, you know, a year ago or whatever. This came up in a journey. But right now in that journey, one of the things I was told by Spirit is that humanity right now in this pandemic has a fever, and we've got to sweat it out. And that's what we're going through right now. We're sweating out whatever it is that's sick for our species, for our civilization, and for our society. We've got to get rid of that, and we've got to, you know, the virus has to be killed off by that fever. And that virus, there's so many things, you know, until this pandemic, I was thinking that, you know, we are just heading so fast as a civilization over a cliff in regard to how we've been treating the environment and all those sorts of things, that I just thought, I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years' time. And now, it's like we've been, you know, the kibosh has been put on us. We've been stopped. We've been prevented from doing a lot of things that we were doing before. And in that process of coming to a stop, we've had this time to reevaluate what is important to us and what's important for our survival. So Dante said, in the middle of our life journey, I found myself in a dark wood. I had wandered from the straight path. It isn't easy to talk about it. It was such a thick, wild and rough forest that when I think of it, my fear returns. I can't offer any good explanation for how I entered it. I was so sleepy at that point that I strayed from the right path. And I think that this experience that we're going through, that these transformational experiences that people go through, give us a chance to wake up from being so sleepy that we stray from the right path. And we're sort of going from one world to the other at the moment. We're leaving the old world behind that we used to have and going forward to another world. But will that world be identical like it is here to the one previously? No, It won't be. It'll be different. Hopefully it will be improved, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. But we certainly are at a crossroads, that's for sure. We've all got to make our individual decisions, just like people who have transformative experiences. Those experiences create that crossroads in their life where they have to make decisions about how they'll go forward from there. And this is the last slide. I just put it in here because I wondered, you know, with spiritually transformative experiences and near-death experiences, people are changed, and they are changed to have a sense of interconnectedness and a sense of oneness and a sense of the planet is a global village and that we are all part of the one family. And I'm wondering if some of the government's decisions now and in the future are going to be a bit at odds with that, with what how people are transformed. And I put out a couple of questions here. Will we have a reversal of globalization due to this pandemic? And I think we will. I think we're seeing signs of that already. But will that return us to being xenophobic? Well, yeah, it could. And, you know, those two questions have positives and they have negatives. It can go either way. I don't know what's going to happen. But I think, you know, we've got to look at what are our lessons moving forward. What have we learned from people who have near-death experiences? That, you know, to be less materialistic, to be more spiritually focused or spiritually engaged, to care more about others, to care less about what people think of us, you know, for the ego to be tamed, basically. And if we can get that right, I think that we can move forward in a positive way. How that's going to work out at the government level, I don't know. Hopefully it will. Hopefully we'll all be on the same side.